This is Beyond the Matrix, Introduction to the Real Season 2 Chapter 4. In this episode, we will be talking about the distinction between the God of the system and the source, which manifests the real through its will. It occurs to me that the attribution of qualities to the source is a fundamental error. In that the source is beyond human understanding, beyond form, manifest as the real. The attribution of qualities, the use of human reasoning to understand the source, fails to recognize that the source is beyond all form, beyond duality. The only proper language that can be applied to the source is non-dualistic, or lacks the appendage of a dualistic opposite, or even a dualistic conception of scale. To ascribe qualities to the source is to define it, limit it, in such a fashion as to render it contingent, rather than absolute. Some religions ascribe human language to the divine, in such a fashion, so as to create a God of form, rather than substance. This is tantamount to creating an independent entity anchored in the forms of our understanding, manifesting within form, as an aberration of the divine will. Rather like looking at God's reflection, praying to God's reflection, when in fact, God is beyond form itself. That isn't to say that the source cannot be known in the system. Although beyond human reasoning, comprehension, in its qualities, beyond dualistic conceptions, it can be known through its direct action in manifesting the real, as well as through its direct action in the form of miracles within the system, that is, that which defies the conventional. Likewise, it would be folly to ascribe a human will to the will of the source in the direct action of miracles on earth. The human will is limited by human understanding, knowledge, whereas the source adheres to the substance of the real. The source has a separate will and substance from man, it compels all things according to its ends, objectives. In a way, you could suggest that in the manifestation of the will of the source, there is a purer manifestation of the real than the contingent manifestation of the real according to our needs. In other words, when the real manifests in form according to our need, it does so contingently to that need as a subsidiary to our nature. Whereas through miracle, we see direct intervention of the real, manifestation of the will of the source with all the purity of that will. Thus, it is apparent that it is not at all surprising that the manifestation of form in the real according to our need, contingently, follows from the anthropomorphic principle. Whereas in the manifestation of miracle, we see the pure manifestation of the will of the source, in defiance of conventionality, free of the contingency of the form of humanity. In other words, through each manifestation of the real in form, we see a nourishment of the anthropomorphic principle, according to the need of mankind. We see nature as sustaining the divine through each contingent form. But in miracle we see the purity of the real, free of said contingency, representing the sovereign will of the source. In this, we can understand that the God of form, the manifestation of the source's reflection in the forms of reality, fails to manifest such a sovereign will, as it is bound to the contingent structures of the system. Thus, true recognition of the real requires that one distinguish between worship and apprehension of the real's true nature in the source. That's the end of the podcast for today. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe.